Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're taking a look into the complex world of Pakistan's inter-services intelligence, the ISI.
Right. And our mission here really is to unpack its origins, how it actually functions, look at some key operations, and also the controversies, the points of discussion around this very powerful, often quite secretive agency.
Yeah,
We're using some pretty detailed material on its history and activities to try and give you a clear picture.
exactly. We know you want to get a solid understanding sort of quickly
Mm-hmm.
without getting totally bogged down in detail.
Mm-hmm.
So we've tried to sift through it and just pull out the most important, maybe the most fascinating pieces of the puzzle for you.
Sounds good.
Okay, so let's start right at the beginning.
Mm.
Where did the idea for the ISI even come from?
Well, it was established back in January 1948. Its creation was a direct result of the First Kashmir War. That conflict really exposed some, let's say, critical weaknesses in how Pakistan's military and the intelligence bodies they already had, like the IB, the Intelligence Bureau, and MI, military intelligence, how they were gathering and, importantly, coordinating intelligence. It showed there was a real need for something more cohesive.
So it's kind of learning the hard way, needing to adapt after that experience.
Precisely, yeah. The actual concept came from Major General Walter Cawthorn. He was the deputy chief of staff of the Pakistan Army then.
Okay.
But the job of actually setting it up, from scratch, that fell to Brigadier Sajid Hamid.
Building it all from the ground up.
Exactly. Building everything, procedures, recruitment, the whole thing.
Wow. Starting an agency like that from basically nothing must have been, well, a huge task.
Mm.
What were the early hurdles?
Well, the sources point to a pretty significant lack of experienced intelligence people. And even basic stuff like intelligence records, they just didn't have much.
Yeah.
Yeah. But despite those, big challenges, Brigadier Hamid is credited with getting the ISI up and running pretty successfully, relatively quickly.
Hmm.
And this early phase also saw them setting up important links with British intelligence, who apparently gave some useful guidance.
Interesting. And the name Inter-Services, that obviously points to how it's structured, right?
It does, yes. The name really reflects that it draws its officers on secondment from all three military branches, Army, Navy, Air Force.
Well,
And they also recruit civilians, bringing in different skills. Initially, its focus was meant to be mainly on external intelligence, both military and non-military stuff.
and who heads up the ISI now? Who's in charge?
Since 1971, it's been formally led by a serving three-star general from the Pakistan Army.
A very senior figure.
Absolutely. The Director General, or DG, is appointed by the Prime Minister, but it's done in consultation with the Chief of Army Staff. The COAS usually recommends three names.
Correct.
As of late September 2024, the current DG is Lieutenant General Asim Malik.
So a top military leader reporting directly to both the civilian government head and the military head. That really underlines its importance, doesn't it?
It really does. The DG reports straight to both the PM and the COAS. Oh, and interestingly, the ISI actually has a formal heraldic slogan.
Oh, yeah? What is it?
Take your precautions. It's a quote from the Quran, gives you a sense of their operational mindset, perhaps.
Definitely sets a tone. What about the size of the agency? How big is the ISI?
Well, exact numbers are hard to come by, obviously. But back in 2009, estimates put it at around 10,000 officers and staff.
Oh.
And it's important to remember that figure doesn't include their network of informants, which would make their actual reach much, much wider.
Right.
Their headquarters are in Islamabad. Descriptions make it sound sort of like a well-funded private university.
Huh. Not the dark, shadowy bunker image some might have.
Apparently not. Suggests, sophisticated setup, discreet security.
So how does someone actually get into the ISI? What's the recruitment like?
For civilians, it starts with the Federal Public Services Commission, the FPSC. They run exams testing, general knowledge, analytical skills.
Okay.
If you pass that, then the ISI does its own vetting, thorough background checks, interviews.
Rigorous.
Seems like it. And then if you clear all that, there's a 6-month training program at the Defense Services Intelligence Academy, the DSIA.
And for military officers?
As we said, they're seconded from their branches, usually after showing they've got the right aptitude and experience.
Okay, so a pretty demanding way in, either way. What about the internal structure? How's it all organized to do its job?
It's hierarchical, as you'd expect. The Director General is at the top. Then there are 3 deputy DGs overseeing key wings.
Wings like?
Internal operations dealing with domestic threats, external intelligence focusing on foreign intel, and foreign relations managing liaison with other countries' agencies. And these wings are then broken down further into lots of directorates. Each one is usually headed by a senior officer, a major general, air marshal, or rear admiral, depending on their service.
Right, those acronyms earlier were a bit much.
Hmm.
Can you maybe give us a clearer idea of what some of these directorates actually do? Like break down that alphabet soup a bit.
Sure, let's try. Think of the Covert Action Division, that's for clandestine ops, sometimes compared to the CIA's Special Activities Division.
Okay, the secret stuff.
Pretty much. Then there's Joint Intelligence X, or JIX. Its main job is coordination, making sure intel gets shared and analyzed properly across the agency.
Crucial.
Very. The Joint Intelligence Bureau, JIB, focuses on domestic intelligence, anti-state activities, things like counterfeit money, watching groups like the TTP, the Pakistani Taliban.
Right.
The Joint Counterintelligence Bureau, JCIB, its job is countering foreign spy agencies operating inside Pakistan. Joint Intelligence North, JIN, concentrates on Jammu and Kashmir and Gilgit-Baltistan. Then you have the Signals Intelligence folks, Joint Signal Intelligence Bureau, JSIB. They handle electronic intel, communications intercepts, especially along the border with India.
Aside.
Exactly. And Joint Intelligence Technical, JIT, looks at using science and tech for intel gathering, including cyber warfare. There's also an SS Directorate monitoring terrorist groups threatening Pakistan.
And you mentioned a political wing.
Yes, historically there was one involved in domestic politics. But our sources suggest it's been inactive for, well, over a decade now.
Okay, that paints a much clearer picture of the different parts. Now let's shift gears to the really big stuff, the ISI's involvement in major historical events. The Soviet-Afghan War in the 80s has to be top of the list, right?
Absolutely. The 1980s in Afghanistan, that's really when the ISI stepped onto the international stage in a big way.
How so?
They were central to supporting the Afghan Mujahideen fighting the Soviet occupation. This meant working very closely with the CIA and also the UK's MI6.
Operation Cyclone.
That's the one, a huge program. The ISI basically coordinated the training, the weapons, the funding for the Mujahideen, and they had major backing from China, Saudi Arabia, other Muslim nations too.
A massive undertaking.
It was. And while it was seen as a strategic win against the Soviets, it also sort of inadvertently helped fuel the growth of radical Islamist groups.
Ah, the unintended consequences.
Exactly. Groups that later became a huge problem for the region and for Pakistan itself. It's a recurring theme, isn't it? Short-term wins, long-term instability.
The powerful point. And what happened after the Soviets left Afghanistan? Did the ISI stay involved?
Oh, yes, deeply involved. After the Soviet withdrawal and the collapse of the government they left behind, the ISI provided significant strategic support to the Taliban.
During the Civil War?
During the Civil War in the 90s, yes, against the Northern Alliance. The documents we have really emphasize the ISI's strong, established links with various jihadist groups in Afghanistan and also in Kashmir during that time.
And these links, these connections, they've been a massive source of controversy and international scrutiny ever since, haven't they?
Without a doubt. I mean, the FBI, back in 2011, publicly stated that the ISI sponsors and oversees the insurgency in Kashmir, arming and supporting separatist groups.
That's quite a statement from the FBI.
It is. And beyond that, there have been numerous very serious accusations, though often without that definitive public proof linking the ISI to major terrorist attacks across India.
Could you give us some examples of those alleged incidents?
Well, the list includes things like the Mumbai train bombings in 2006, the attack on the Indian parliament back in 2001, the terrible Mumbai attacks in 2008, and also bombings in Varanasi and Hyderabad.
A long list.
It is. And the ISI has also faced constant accusations of supporting, recruiting and training Taliban fighters and Mujahideen for conflicts in both Afghanistan and Kashmir.
Right.
U.S. intelligence assessments even concluded the ISI was behind the 2008 bombing of the Indian embassy in Kabul.
So it paints a picture, based on these accusations, of an agency very actively supporting groups that align with Pakistan's strategic goals against, perceived enemies like India.
That's certainly the narrative that comes through from a lot of the information. And look, General Javed Nasir, who was a former DG of the ISI himself,
Yes.
he actually admitted to assisting Bosnian Muslims, Chinese Muslims in Xinjiang, some rebel groups in the Philippines, and certain religious groups in Central Asia, too.
Really, he admitted that.
According to reports, yes. There's also evidence suggesting ISI involvement in supplying weapons to Bosnian Mujahideen during the war in Bosnia in '93, and the allegations don't stop there. Potential links to Naxalite groups in India, support for Khalistani separatism. It's extensive.
But it hasn't all been smooth sailing or successes for them, has it? You mentioned earlier the material points to a breakdown during the 1965 war with India.
That's a really important counterpoint. The '65 war definitely highlighted major intelligence failures. Reports from the time suggest the agencies were maybe too focused on domestic politics and failed to properly track Indian military movements and plans. It was a big enough failure that it actually led to a committee being formed to review and reform how Pakistan's intelligence agencies operated.
So a catalyst for change, in a way.
You could say that.
And what about that reported cooperation with the CIA on the Khalistan movement back in the late 60s, early 70s? That might surprise some people.
Well, according to the account of B. Raman, an Indian spy master, that cooperation did happen during the Nixon administration. It just shows how complex and, frankly, how changeable these geopolitical alliances can be.
Definitely.
But the ISI has had its internal successes, too, like uncovering that alleged plot to assassinate President Zia-ul Haq and stage a coup in 1980.
Right.
But then again, failures too, like failing to stop that terror campaign run by the Afghan agency KHAD and the Soviet KGB inside Pakistan in 1987.
And the domestic political interference that keeps coming up? The 1990 election rigging claims are pretty persistent.
Yes, it's widely believed, certainly by many observers, that the ISI, under Lieutenant General Hamid Gul at the time, significantly interfered in the 1990 elections.
The aim
being to ensure the victory of the Islami Jamhuri Ittihad, the IJI party, and basically defeat Benazir Bhutto's PPP. More recently, the ISI has been heavily involved in the war in northwest Pakistan, fighting against the TTP, and they've taken casualties in that conflict.
It's a dangerous business.
Absolutely. And another point showing the complex relationships, remember after Osama bin Laden was killed in 2011?
Yes.
The ISI arrested several Pakistanis who were reportedly working as CIA informants, including Shakil Afridi, the doctor. That certainly highlighted the sometimes tense adversarial side of the relationship with the U.S.
Definitely. And what about counterespionage? Catching other countries' spies?
The records show they've been active there, too, uncovering and disrupting intelligence operations by Libya, the Soviets, France, involving agents apparently recruited by the CIA and the U.S. itself, operating within Pakistan. There are also reports they played a key role in helping Sri Lanka crush the Tamil insurgency, which India's RAW was allegedly backing.
And they've had successes against militant groups, too.
Yes, definitely. The ISI is credited with capturing quite a few high-profile al-Qaeda and Taliban figures over the years.
Right.
People like Ramzi Youssef, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, Abu Zubaydah, Mullah Baradar.
Right, some big names there. Okay, let's jump forward again. The fall of Kabul in 2021. That was seen by many as a major strategic win for the ISI, wasn't it? What was the thinking there?
Well, the long-term goal, arguably, for the ISI was always to have a friendly government in Afghanistan, one that wouldn't pose a threat, maybe even offer Pakistan some strategic depth.
Okay.
So the Taliban takeover, especially with the Haqqani network having such strong influence in their government, that was seen as a big step towards achieving that goal, securing their western border, essentially.
Right.
But that period also saw increased suspicion about ISI counterintelligence activities targeting CIA operations in the AfPak region.
Which leads us nicely into the controversies and criticisms.
Yeah.
That phrase, state within a state, gets thrown around a lot regarding the ISI.
It does, and it really speaks to those long-running accusations about the ISI operating without enough transparency, without sufficient accountability to civilian leaders. I mean, the fact that some reports suggested Guantanamo Bay files actually listed the ISI as a terrorist organization, that shows you how deep some negative perceptions run.
Wow.
And U.S. officials quite consistently over the years have voiced concerns, accused the ISI of keeping ties with terror groups, the Haqqani network being the prime example, and supporting the Taliban during the Afghan war.
And India's accusations are just as serious going way back. The '93 Bombay bombings, ongoing support for militants in Kashmir.
Yes, and a core theme in all these criticisms is the alleged use of designated terrorist groups as proxies.
Using them to achieve strategic aims.
That's the allegation. Accusations of close ties with groups like Lashkar-e-Taiba, Hizbul Mujahideen, Jaish-e-Mohammed, even al-Qaeda. And even after 9/11, when there were periods of reported cooperation on counterterrorism, suspicions lingered. Some senior U.S. officials apparently believed the ISI might have even known where bin Laden was or harbored him.
Those are heavy accusations. What about interference within Pakistan? The claims about the judiciary abduction, torture, surveillance of judges.
Yeah, that letter from the Islamabad High Court judges really brought those very serious allegations out into the open.
Mhm.
It definitely highlights ongoing tensions, a lack of trust maybe, between parts of the judiciary and the intelligence community in Pakistan.
And it's worth remembering, as you said, the ISI itself has been targeted. They've suffered losses fighting militant groups.
Absolutely. Attacks on their offices, personnel.
Yeah.
It underscores the real dangers they face in their own operations against these very groups.
Even appointing the Director General hasn't always been straightforward, has it? It seems to highlight that tension between civilian and military leadership.
That disagreement back in 2021 over the DG appointment is a perfect example, really. It laid bare those underlying power dynamics, the complexities between the elected government and the military establishment. And more recently, the circumstances around the death of the journalist Arshad Sharif. That's also stirred up significant controversy and more scrutiny of the ISI.
So, okay, let's try and wrap this up.
Yeah.
As we finish this deep dive, what are the really crucial takeaways for you? What should listeners really remember about the ISI?
I think, in essence, you have to see the ISI as a really significant, powerful player in Pakistan's national security world. Its history is, well, complicated,
Definitely.
marked by big strategic successes like its role in Afghanistan against the Soviets, but also by these deep, persistent, serious controversies, especially about links to militant groups and its domestic influence.
Right.
Its impact on the region, particularly regarding Afghanistan and India, is just undeniable. It's a major factor still in South Asian geopolitics and security.
For me, I think one aha moment is just grasping the sheer scale and evolution. Starting with, few resources and becoming this huge influential agency.
Yeah.
Or maybe that stark contrast working so closely with the CIA in the Cold War and then these later periods of deep mistrust and suspicion.
Mm-hmm.
Even just the fact that a major state intelligence agency could end up being labeled, in some contexts, as a terrorist group.
Yeah.
That's quite something to get your head around.
It is. And really, our goal here was to give you that foundational understanding. It's an agency that works mostly in the shadows, but has enormous influence.
Yeah.
Understanding its origins, its operations, the controversies,
Yeah.
it's pretty crucial if you want to understand the bigger picture of what's happening in that part of the world.
Absolutely. And maybe a final thought for everyone listening to mull over. Given this long, tangled history, supporting militants sometimes, fighting them other times, and these ongoing questions about accountability, about civilian control, what does that mean for the future? For regional stability, yes, but also for Pakistan's own internal dynamics, especially as the world keeps changing in unpredictable ways.
That's the big question, isn't it? Lots to think about.
Definitely gives you a lot to consider. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.